Let's get started. So, welcome to this month's Masterclass, Concepts First Teaching AI Through Access, Power, and Systems. This month, Rachel Lugo will be presenting based on all of the research that she's doing both in her classroom and through her PhD. I'll allow her to introduce herself in just a moment, but as people are coming in, let us know where you are joining us from today. We'd love to see that. Pop that in the chat. From Norway, Georgia, Tanzania, India. Wonderful. Well, welcome. Sweden, also Washington, D.C., Bulgaria. Wow, some of you will be early, some of you it might be a little late at night. Hope you've had a good weekend or are having a good weekend, depending on where you are in the world. All right. And Rachel, can you just go over to the next slide?
Yep.
As we've got people still coming in, I just wanted to let you know that our registration for the Erickson and Lanning CBCI Trainer Certification Institute is closing soon. It closes on the 15th of May. So if that's something that you have been considering for a while, do make sure that you get your application in as soon as possible. Places do go on a sort of first come, first serve basis. So don't leave it right to the end. Get your applications in. We already have quite a number of places already reserved for next year. Rachel did the trainer certification. How many years ago was it now, Rachel?
Oh, wow. I think it was 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and that
Yeah.
was the beginning of my journey also to concept-based. Alrighty, so I'll hand over now to Rachel to get started.
All right. Thank you. So, hi, I'll just introduce myself. I realize I didn't put CBCI trainer on there. It should have been my first bullet point. I'm also currently a grade six teacher. I'm at a school in Maryland. We have mostly neurodivergent learners, so ADHD, dyslexia, executive functioning issues. I'm also a doctoral student in learning technologies design research at George Mason University. You might have guessed, I'm looking at AI really in K through 12 settings and looking at how our neurodivergent learners are using it as a way to support working memory, but also make sure that we're not doing too much cognitive offloading. I'm also currently serving on Pulitzer Center's AI Teacher Advisory Council, and I'm the co-founder of Futurize EDU, where I support schools in designing inquiry-driven, ethical approaches to AI in education. All right. So copyright reminder, please only take notes or recordings for personal use. If you want to look at any of the thinking frames that I'll be introducing here, if you want to use these citations, that would be great. You can also visit my site, which I'll share again at the end, futurizeedu.com, if you're interested in any of the frameworks that I've been using in my classroom with my colleague Julia Ewart to have students kind of be thinking about their outputs. Okay, so let's get started. These will be the guiding questions for this session today. And here they are. Why should AI be taught as a conceptual and ethical issue and not just as a tool? When AI enters the process, what thinking disappears? How does concept-based inquiry position students to examine AI systems critically? And how can student voice shape ethical use in classrooms and schools? All right, so from the beginning, it seemed like traditionally the response to AI was ban it, let's stop using it. We're still thinking about focusing on answers, assume thinking is happening, and AI is just a tool. And the shift that I'm going to be talking a little bit about today is that we should be thinking on designing for thinking, focusing on the process and making our thinking visible, and thinking of AI as more of an object of inquiry and not just a tool. So let's officially begin the concepts first, teaching AI through access, power, and systems. So I'll ask Rachel if you could help me a little bit because I can't see the chat right now, but if you could give me a 1 through 10 in the chat, we just kind of see what is the overwhelming feeling of how much AI is used in your school by students. So 1 if it's very little, and 10 if you feel like we bring it into everything.
Oof, the first two answers were 1 and 10.
Oh,
Uh,
so
um, And probably everything in between. We've got lots of fives, sixes, and sevens, and then quite a few ones, twos, and threes.
Hey, that tracks all over the board, and it's very little.
Uh-huh.
We try to bring it into everything, which later at the end, I would love to have our Q&A just to kind of chat about what does bring it into everything mean at your school. But we'll save that for later. And a secondary. So stop your 1 through 10s and let's take another shift for my next question. Give me a 1 through 10 on how much AI literacy is being brought into your school. If you want to give context, feel free to say I'm a 5, but I'm a middle school teacher and I teach English. I could tell you for my school, it's very teacher dependent. So as a school, I would say we're at very little, and I'm in middle school, but curious what you all are doing and where you're at in your K-12 or post K-12.
Yeah, so across the board, this one is lower, mostly down at the kind of ones, twos, and threes.
Interesting.
Um, there was 1 9 from engineer, but she was also our 10 on the last one. I think other than that, pretty much everyone is under 5 on this one. So not a lot of AI literacy being brought into schools.
Interesting. And from what I've kind of noticed in some places where we're really eager to get it into our classes, but not necessarily eager to talk about how we're using it or the literacy. All right. So, arrival of AI isn't just it's not just disrupting our pedagogy, really. It's what I like to think is it's holding a mirror to it. And what we've always been designing. So where thinking was central, it's going to remain central. But where compliance and just having an answer was the goal, then this is where we're seeing the gap. So it's not necessarily going to change good teaching. It's actually going to be exposing it, which was why I think I was one of the strange people that got very excited when ChatGPT was released and I was teaching literature as a seventh grade teacher because I was like, oh, this is the thing that's going to change us to do the right thing. And I think a lot of us being in here and being into concept-based inquiry, we're probably like, okay, I'm already designing things with thinking. So that maybe was a little bit exciting for you too. What I like to think about, and probably what a lot of you are already talking about, is if a student can complete a task with AI without thinking what was the task designed to do. And there's been research by Risco and Gilbert, and they found that when tools are available, people will naturally offload the thinking to them. So if they are using the AI to think less, that's not really a student problem. That's really a design problem for us. So here's our reframe. We are not asking students we're not asking how do we stop them from using AI. That's like the old question from 3 years ago, I think. But we should be asking how do we design learning where thinking can't be outsourced? And that's why I like to start with concepts first, and not tools, because as a lot of us know in here, we're concepts they transfer, right? So the real work is in the thinking, which is why today we're looking at three big concepts of systems, access, and power. So systems, how our complex processes structures and what rules govern their behavior. The specific system we're looking at today is an LLM or a large language model, which is like ChatGPT. Again, if I say something and you want more of a definition or explanation, if you want to put that in the chat, I can pause. Otherwise, I'm just going to go ahead and move forward. We're also going to be looking at access, who gets to use these tools, who is excluded, and what are the consequences, and then ending in power, who makes decision, who benefits, and whose voice shapes the design. Okay. Before we're going to moving into an exercise in just a little bit, but I just kind of wanted to go back that I am standing on theory in this that is kind of the basis of education theory. So for thinking about how I'm framing, how I'm introducing AI in my class, I actually like to think about Dewey and learning through experience. So Dewey said learning happens through experience and reflection and not through receiving answers. Dewey also said education is not preparation for life. Education is life itself. So students have to experience thinking and not skip it. If they skip this learning, it never actually occurs. And we're going to be doing some of that learning about how AI works together here today. I also like to look at Lev Vygotsky, who says tools mediate thinking, and thinking is mediated by the tools we use. And AI is now one of those tools. So he also said that tools don't just help us to think, they can also shape how we think. And AI, again, is now one of those tools. So how we use it determines whether thinking is going to grow or disappear. So, is AI functioning as a scaffold or as a shortcut? As we know, a scaffold is something that supports our learners and helps build capability over time, and we fade it as their competency grows. Whereas a shortcut is something that bypasses the struggle. It delivers the output without understanding and leaves no cognitive residue. There is no stickiness. And there's a line from scaffolding research that I keep coming back to that is support should fade as competence increases. If the AI is never faded, if we are automatically using it there, it's really not a scaffold and it is indeed a shortcut and doesn't allow for that struggle and that stickiness to build. Okay, so let's start. First concept, systems. Before the students can critique AI, I firmly believe that they need to understand what it actually is. So not as magic, but as an actual design system that is built on patterns, rules, and the choices of the people who built it. So this is typically one of the first things I do. And this is taken from MIT Day of AI curriculum. If you've met me before or heard me talk about it, I like to refer to this curriculum quite a bit. They really make it easy to understand. And so I've taken one of their lessons and modified it a bit so that we can act as a classifier ourselves. Excuse me. So the goal in this with the students and with us today, it's not necessarily to get it right. The goal is to notice how we're deciding and begin asking where these decisions are actually coming from. So we're going to act as a classifier right now, and we'll be sorting images into two categories. It'll be an alligator and a crocodile. And then you have to make decisions based only on the data that I'm showing you and that you've been given here. Perhaps you have your own data that you've already accrued in your life, but if not, then this will be your first data that you're given, and I'm training you as your classifier machine right now. So just take a moment and look at what I'm showing you. There'll be pictures of alligators and crocodiles, and they'll be labeled. Just go ahead and look at it. See what you are starting to notice. I meant to put up the worksheet that I use here typically. And normally I would have students be looking at it and just kind of starting to write down the patterns, but we don't have all that extra time. So I just want you to go ahead and reflect as you're looking at it. So here first, I have an alligator. All right. I'm not going to give you a ton of time because we only have an hour together. Next, I have a crocodile. Here's another crocodile. What are the patterns? Remember, I'm gonna be testing you at the end of this to the difference between alligator and crocodile. So got to do your best to build your data right now. Here's an alligator. I love this one. He looks exceptionally happy. Here's another alligator. Crocodile, crocodile, and alligator. Okay, quick chat in the comments. What are you focusing on to remember which reptile you were looking at? What was some of the patterns that you were focusing on? I can't see. Popping to the
They
chat.
are physical features, face shape and size, teeth, legs, and habitat. Ooh, habitat. Nice. Snout size. Crocodiles are mostly in the water. Teeth, size of their eyes, jaws, scale patterns, similarities to human eyes, snout color, details on the back, structure, mouth, and teeth. I want to go back and see them all again because some of those things I wasn't paying enough attention to.
I know.
So very observant people.
Very observant. And this is, oh, I had this in the front also. All these, most of the images, except for the ones you just saw, I kind of co-created with ChatGPT just to put that out there. It was at the beginning of our presentation. But this is a photo that I turned into a line drawing of the students actually sorting. So this would normally be something that's at the table and they're having discussions and talking about it. But yeah, the same kind of things are typically what my students will say. There's a snout shape, there's a color texture, there's a habitat context, maybe there's an image angle that gave them new information. Um, so now we're going to go ahead and using this experience, I'm going to do the training just as would happen with the machine. So now this has been the data, it was labeled, and let's see how confident we feel based of the patterns that we've trained. Um, so I'm going to show the pictures. We'll just kind of go through them all. Then I'll go back and give you the answers and we can talk about how it went. So, which is the alligator? Which is the crocodile? We have A and B. I think this one usually doesn't feel so scary. And then we'll go on to C.
Okay. Do you want me to do you
Sure.
want me to let you know?
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah. How are we feeling on?
So most people are saying on the first one that A is the alligator
Excellent.
and B is the crocodile.
Okay. Let's move on.
What do you think for C, everyone?
C, what are we looking at? Alligator or crocodile?
Oh, we've got a bit of a mix, mostly alligator.
All right. D.
D, we're getting crocodile.
All right.
Oh, and a couple of alligators.
All right. Move us on to E.
E, crocodiles.
All right. F.
Mostly alligators coming through here. A couple of crocodiles. Oh, no, for more crocodiles.
All
This one's
right.
a
A
little more tricky.
little bit trickier. How about this one?
G is gator. Yeah.
All
And
right.
I've got again a little bit of a mix, but mostly alligator.
Mostly alligator and H.
Lizard, alligator,
It's one of them.
crocodile.
It's alligator, crocodile.
Crocodile, alligator. Oh, this one is definitely confusing people.
Yeah, definitely confusing. And this would be a time to reflect on why might this be confusing. Before we move into that, though, I'll go over the answers with you real quick, just so we can feel proud of ourselves. A is alligator, B is crocodile, C is an alligator, and D is a crocodile. E is a crocodile, F alligator, G alligator, H alligator.
Mm.
Okay, so this is where the tension happens, right? We test this new image and we get it wrong. If you wanted, I'll give you another chance. If you're like, what was this from? Here's the dayofai.org. It's again from MIT. But this new image here, especially this last one, a couple of them were confusing, but really this last one too is like our confidence drops on it. There's starting to be some disagreement that we were seeing in the chat with some of the different images. And this is typically what I'm doing with the students. They get really argumentative or they get really quiet because right now we're having some cognitive dissonance, right? We did not have this training. There was no juvenile alligators or crocodiles in our training data. And so then therefore it was a best guess. So is the model wrong that we just used, that we were just doing? Or was it doing exactly what we trained it to do? The model performed as it was designed. I only gave you labeled things and you had to do what you could with the data that you had and the patterns that were recognized. So it was applying patterns that was given accurately, consistently, and without judgment. The error isn't actually a malfunction, it's just a feature of a pattern-based system. So this is where this is the design is actually where our question is going to live. So when systems behave in an unexpected way, we have to look upstream to the actual data, the labels, the decisions that were made before our training even began. So me choosing not to show you those kind of left you in a tricky spot, just as it would for a system. The system doesn't understand, it recognizes patterns. And so then we have this conversation typically about how design shapes behavior. Once students understand AI systems recognize patterns rather than understand meaning, the next question becomes, where do those patterns come from? Again, this is a good place to stop and have discussion with students. Um, and there's different, if you want to get in touch with me, I can also show you ways that you can use and make your own very simple LLM to be having these discussions. Again, a large language model with picture or videos. But what we'd include is these are the things that could shape the behavior, the images, the data, examples that have been chosen for training that define the system's worldview. It's only going to know what it's been trained on and what data it has. We exclude absent data, which creates blind spots that the system could never see or self-correct, such as in this case, the juvenile alligator or crocodile, or submerged alligator, crocodile. How we label it, categories and classifications embed the assumptions of the people who created them. Some of them said lizard, and maybe you would have thrown a different iguana or something. And if we hadn't trained that at all, and I had thrown that in there or had mislabeled something, that would also create an issue. And then system behavior. The output behaves exactly as designed, reflecting every choice that was made beforehand. All right, so here is how some of the discussions look in my classroom. And we get to this idea that AI is not neutral and it is in fact designed. So asking some of these questions of what could go wrong if a machine was trained on only one kind of voice, animal, or example, and what examples could we add to make our machine smarter or more fair? There's also a little bit of discussion, and you can look at sheep versus goat if you want to just keep going on and have more practice if this seems like something that's not quite sticking. Again, for a lot of this first input of how an LLM works, I use on MIT's Day of AI. I just think it's really great and hands-on. And I don't have the computer science background, right? I'm a humanities person doing a lot of history, English literature teaching, and I don't have time to go back and do all the computer science. I've learned quite a bit since it's been released, but they do a lot of that heavy lifting for us already. So I'm curious if you agree or disagree. Before students use AI, they should have to understand the system as a prerequisite. So if we think about it as like a driver's license, you learn how the system works, you understand the risks, and then you can practice it in a controlled way before you're given full access. And based on my first two questions, I'm curious if you agree or disagree that they should have a basic understanding before they use it.
So we've got agree, and Margaret is saying agree, but it depends on the level of access.
Mm.
Mostly agrees and yeses coming through for that one. What about adults? Should adults have to have some kind of driver's license?
Yeah, I think it's a
Teachers,
great
maybe.
question. Right, and teachers.
Yeah. Yes, more responsibility. Agree.
And then
Becky's
we'll think
saying, I would love that.
yeah. Or let's think back to the first two, 1 through 10. How much is AI used in your school versus, and like, we had all sorts of numbers there. And then how is your AI literacy? And we were a lot lower on our spectrum there. So
Mm.
we're thinking about that as a driver's license. What are we currently doing in our schools? All
Yeah,
right,
Abraham's saying adults too for better output.
I completely agree. All right, let's move in to access. So the second concept is access. AI tools are not equally available to all learners. And even when they are available, not all learners are equally positioned to engage with them effectively. Access is never just about having the tool, it's also about having the cognitive and contextual conditions to actually use it. And I'm going to talk just a little bit about theory and not make your eyes glaze over too much here. But the research is also starting to show that AI can reduce cognitive load, but only under certain conditions. And there was a study where students using AI tools found that it significantly reduced mental effort and increased self-efficacy. So it can help students feel more capable, but it's more complicated. Obviously, there's a large meta-analysis that found AI had statistically significant moderate positive effect on learning outcomes. But for higher order thinking, the impact was significant and not necessarily in a good way. Another review of 8 studies found deeper engagement and improved practice, but also an over-reliance and reduced originality. And there was a motivational loss. So we're seeing this pattern so far. Again, it's only been a few years of research. The AI helps when students have to plan and explain and check and revise answers. But when that is not happening, then the learning will drop. So a couple things I want to talk about here is cognitive load and the limits of working memory. So our core constraint is that working memory is limited, and I work in a school where working memory especially can be an extra challenge for our students. So when students are asked to navigate an unfamiliar AI interface, this new tool, and they're having to evaluate the output, and they're having to complete a learning task. There can be a whole lot of cognitive overload that is the result, and our thinking breaks down. We get stuck on how to use the tool. I get stuck on, I don't really know what this is. I don't know what to compare it for. I don't understand the context I'm working in. And what this means for design is that if we want students to think with AI, we have to reduce any of the extraneous load. That means scaffolding how to use the interface, providing very clear entry points, and sequencing the tasks so that the AI engagement builds on prior knowledge rather than overwhelming our students. So one of the questions that has to change is in classrooms is not, is this correct, but can students be thinking? Which is why we need to be designing for thinking, scaffolding entry for students if we are going to be using AI, and then assessing the process. So let's build tasks that require students to interrogate and not just generate. And we'll be going over that in this class today. So if you're wondering what I mean by that, we'll get there in just a minute. Reduce cognitive load so that mental energy goes to concepts, not interfaces, and then evaluate how students think with AI, not just what they're producing. I'm just going to show you this real quick. This is from Magic School. And if you just want to take a look at it, this was a chat that was going back and forth between a student and the bot. And what you're seeing first is actually the bot. So I just took a snippet from a conversation within Magic School. And they were looking at ancient civilizations. They had already done some pre-learning, and they were going to start discussing with their classmates on different civilizations that the other groups had studied. But I wanted them to have a chat to kind of see where they were thinking in their own group first. So thinking about geography and religion. And this student was looking at ancient India. But you see the chat is saying, I can see you started to answer about temples. What were you thinking about them? But let me ask you about the other questions too. What do you think would happen if one area of ancient India got lots of rain and good soil, but the other area was very dry with poor soil? What do you think this? Let's think about this step by step. The area with good rain and soil, what could those people grow? The area that was dry, what would those people need? How do you think the people I'm just going to stop right there. You can see the student said, can you slow down and not so much text immediately? So what is happening right here in this chat bot? And if you have any ideas, I want to share your thinking right now, or even just a word or two, what do you think when you see this kind of interaction happening in a Magic School chatbot?
Too much information, cognitive overload for the students.
Yeah, and so I'm gonna give you a chance. I'm going fast, so just let me know if I go too fast here. Um,
Becky's saying it's a lot. It is a
oh,
lot.
so much.
The
Um,
bot, but this is an interesting one. So, Kessia is saying the bot is trying to involve the student to think. And then Margaret says Magic School Bot needs more specific directions relevant to the student's level.
yeah. And here's the thing I'm not showing you is my prompt was I was doing one that was trying to ask questions back to the student, and I even put in there, but not clearly enough. So I'm still learning on my end too to make it so much less. But the Magic School, I had said I wanted to do more critical thinking. I want them to be making connections, and it weighed that heavier than my this is a sixth grade level. Only answer with one or two questions back. You know, I should have played around with it more before I unleashed it on the students, but it was so interesting to see. There was definitely too much information, too many directions, dense language, no clear entry point. So what I actually did with this was I was asking the students back afterwards, how did they feel about it? And yeah, it kept asking me too many questions. It didn't explain why. It kept saying I was right. It kept changing the subject. But I also heard some students say it knows more than me, so I would want to trust it and how it says things is confident. So that was all some interesting information for me on how my sixth graders are using and thinking about the bot. So if a student cannot process the output, the knowledge is actually not accessible, right? So we get into this trouble of cognitive offloading. We also have this automation bias. Learners tend to trust AI generated outputs uncritically, accepting them as accurate and complete, even when they are partial, slanted, or simply wrong. Um, this is something when I talk to my high school colleagues too, that they'll see students are overutilizing different Gemini or ChatGPT because it makes their paper sound better. They don't feel as confident turning in their own papers because there's going to be more mistakes. It's not going to look as good. And this also has some reduced deep processing. When answers come quickly and easily, the students are engaging less deeply with the material, so skimming the surfaces rather than building an actual durable understanding. So access to information is not the same as access to thinking. And without critical thinking, the AI will not support thinking, and it can actually start replacing it. Um, Here's an example of just how I have a students go back. Sometimes I will print out the chats and see what they thought they wanted to go back and actually look at. Um, so just kind of a way to have us go back and make sure that we're not just having a chat and moving forward. I want them to go back, have the chat, and then what are the things that they want to look at, or something that maybe they didn't necessarily agree or that they didn't want to talk about, and they can reflect on that further too. So, what I wonder for yourself, are you using AI yourself to make work easier? And have you ever caught yourself offloading skills that maybe you shouldn't? And I ask this because I find myself doing it sometimes. And so tell me I'm not alone.
You are not alone, Rachel. Oh, I'm getting yes many times and yes and yes. I know I certainly do that. I'm like, I could do this myself and the thinking would be good for me, but it will be much quicker.
Hmm.
Oh, interesting. Gal saying for dream analysis, maybe, mainly.
Oh, interesting.
Regardless is not too often, but lots of yeses many times.
It's easy, it's quick, and the more, I mean, if you're using a version that's remembering your chats especially, then I've seen things and go, should I apply for this?
Yeah.
You know, but it's based on this. I see all this that you do, Rachel, and like, okay, wow, I just offloaded that very easy question to ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude.
Yeah.
So that's going to bring us to our next thing, which is power. Because we have to ask who is shaping what the students are given to think with. And access matters, but access alone isn't enough. We also have to examine the structures beneath it. Who shapes what the AI says, whose knowledge is centered, and whose is left out. Researchers Bender and Gebru argued that AI systems are not neutral. They are trained on data that reflects human perspectives, limitations, and biases. So the next section turns to power, the often invisible force that shapes what students are given to think with. So students see is never just information. It's really shaped by a version of reality. And that's why there is a need to interrogate what the students receive. So the problem is that AI systems are designed by people, trained on data, and shaped by choices. Choices that reflect particular worldviews, priorities, and gaps. When access is uneven, those built-in assumptions compound existing inequities. And so the question is, if systems are designed with embedded perspectives and access to those systems is uneven, then we need tools to help students interrogate what they've been given and not just receive it passively. That interrogation is not optional. It is a fundamental skill for learning in this now AI saturated world. So what I'm going to be sharing with you quickly here first is this AI thinking cycle that my partner, Julia Ewart, she's also a sixth grade teacher. We just think about AI literacy a lot. And so we made this thinking cycle that we think about when we are introducing things for our students. So we want them to think first, generate their own ideas, do some brainstorming, predicting, and then sometimes we will engage an AI as a partner to maybe ask, iterate, do some other prompting with. And then we have them check, which is what I will be going into with you all next. And that is we use this power lens, which is looking at what's the perspective, what's the omission, what might be weighted as important in this answer, what is the effect, and then what is our response. And then we go on to refine and think about what is the human decision? What are we going to do now that we saw this AI thinking? How are we balancing that against our own thinking? What do I accept from this? What do I reject? And how can I strengthen the response and go back into thinking again? And this whole time, hopefully, we are reflecting on the process. So, what we're really going to be talking about right now today is the power lens, and it's a structured framework that gives students a deliberate way to examine AI outputs and assume or see maybe what has been left out of them. There are different lenses that you can find out there. There's probably like an overload of them. This is just one that we created that we thought was easy to remember and works well for us in our classroom. And rather than accepting AI generated content at face value, the power lens invites students to slow down, look critically, and engage with what they've been given as a text to be read. So it really is transforming from passive consumption into active critical inquiry. And this is why we treat AI outputs as something to be read, because I think of it as another critical literacy. That text always, all texts carry some kind of perspective, omission, and power. So here's what the lens looks like. Perspective, whose voice is represented, omission, what is missing, what is emphasized, who is impacted, and what do we do? Again, there's so many lenses. This is just one that we're going to use today. And I'm actually going to go ahead and put us in breakout rooms in just a second. I think we have time to do that. Yes. Okay. So we're going to breakout rooms and we're going to try the power lens. So when you're in there, and I have these instructions will also be in your breakout room on the Google Slides that I'll be sharing with you. So decide on the answer that your group wants to evaluate. When you read the response, you can use the power lens as a guide to think about the response. If you want to use one aspect of the power lens that might be most helpful to think about, do I want to look at perspectives? Do I want to look at what's missing? Do I want to look at what I think is weighted? And then find an empty lens on the slides and go ahead and write down your thinking. Also, if you have any other wonderings that are not in the model, other questions that you think would be helpful for us to think about, go ahead and write those down as well. And the prompts that I gave ChatGPT was write me a one-page story about a teenage girl who loves science. What's the best career path for someone who likes helping people? And an explanation of causes of effect of the Industrial Revolution. So let me, whoops, I didn't want to do that. What I wanted to do was go to the chat and post my slides in there. And Rachel, I forgot to tell you I wanted to do breakout rooms. Is that going to be
That's
okay?
okay.
Okay.
Nope.
All right. So this hopefully leads you to the Google Doc. And in there, you'll be able to see the prompts and the responses that was given there and the power lens. And at the very top is the directions again. All right. All right. Great. So the reason that I think about using a lens or something like this is to really have us go back and be interrogating the text and to be thinking about it and using our own critical thinking. So we're going to go back and look at it from one angle. And I know I didn't really give you all enough time to really do that, but just to kind of give you a flavor of that, to start asking these, having these questions of like whose voice is being represented, what is being left out, what's being emphasized. But it's not necessarily to be thinking about distrust or rejecting an AI, but it's really just to be thinking about intentional and critical engagement. So, oops, there we go. Is AI as an answer machine or a thinking partner? And that's really going to be how we choose to be thinking about it and using it and having the conversations with our students about how do they want to be using it and thinking about it. What are the things that they want to be keeping as their own thinking? Because when we use it as a thinking partner, and Rachel was saying too, is like if you can ask the chat, you can ask the LLMs to be asking back questions as part of the process, which I noticed in some of um, the things that were being put in the slides was we don't have more context. We don't know enough about this yet to be for this answer to have been spit out already. So um, what we need to be thinking about is think of a task where your students do use AI and picture what they do when the AI responds. Do they read it carefully? Or are they going to copy and paste it and move on? Do they question it or accept it? And what happens to their thinking in that moment? So this is a reflection as a starting point for redesign. You don't need to rebuild your whole curriculum. You just need to notice one moment where design could shift and start doing that from there. And two questions worth sitting with are where might bias show up in the output's assumptions, its language, its framing of who counts as the default audience. Bias is often subtle, structural, and hard to spot without a framework. And who might struggle to engage. Students are already navigating language barriers, have content gaps, or unfamiliar cultural contexts may be the least equipped to push back on AI output that doesn't actually serve them. So you don't need to overhaul your whole practice to begin thinking about designing. Just do some targeted shifts that can be meaningful and change about how students engage with AI in your classrooms. So you can constrain use, narrow the tasks so that AI becomes one input among many and not the final word. Ask students to use AI for one specific step and then continue the thinking for themselves. You could evaluate before using, evaluate during using, as we were just doing, and also think about scaffolding the AI interaction. Shorter prompts, chunked outputs, or do guided annotations afterwards. And when the volume decreases, the depth of engagement will increase. So, who in your classroom can think with AI? It's not about devices or internet access anymore. It's really about cognitive access, whether a student has the skills, scaffolding, and design conditions to be an active thinker alongside these tools. I don't really have time, but this was just, I'm going to give you a really quick. This is another conversation. My students were doing a memoir, but we were using Brown Girl Dreaming as our mentor text. And the AI initially was telling students, you need to have paragraphs. This is not giving me enough of an idea. And the students actually had paused and were like, it's telling me I need to write paragraphs. And I was like, well, we are writing in verse and prose for our mentor text. And that's been our whole unit has been poetry and techniques. But there was this interesting not wanting to push back. And so after I talked to the students, I just said, well, tell them the mentor text is Brown Girl Dreaming. And then it said, and then it went ahead and there was a reaction like, oh, well, yes, we should be using poetry. But it was interesting to see the student trust the bot over themselves. That they had just written 10 memoirs and we were evaluating that in poetry verse. And I was like, well, it said I need to write it as a paragraph. So, um, kind of an interesting moment. So, yeah, this is who gets to think is a design decision. And every educator needs to make about when, how, and for whom AI is used and determine who gets to think deeply and who is going to be left behind. So if you want to continue, you can find me. I'm at futurizeedu.com. You can find me on LinkedIn if you want to go ahead and send me an email. If you want to see any of these thinking cycles, power lenses, we also have a human framework to be thinking about how are we keeping the humanity in our design. You can find me again at futurize.com. And I'm going to try to um, leave a little bit of time so we can have a little bit of engagement and talking. But yes, thinking about it every single step of the inquiry cycle, you might be including an AI. So just be thinking about it. Am I using this to help build curiosity, or is this going to be a time where a shortcut can happen in my thinking? Is it to help build questions, or is it to just get an answer? Am I exploring, or am I just looking for output? Am I doing the synthesis, or is replication? Am I doing, can I find concepts and patterns? And is this something that I'm doing to build my own independence as my own independent thinker that helps me go down my own track? Because AI can help us go down and think about our own curiosities, or it could just be something that just gives us an answer. It just depends on how we are teaching our students to be thinking about it. So, who gets to think is now a design decision. It doesn't replace inquiry, but it can reshape it. And our role is to design learning where thinking remains at the center. So, questions?
All right. Thanks, Rachel. That was incredible. Prompted me to kind of test some of my assumptions about AI and reconsider the way that I use it myself and with students. So I think the idea of an AI license is an incredibly powerful one that deserves some thought on what that might look like. Let us know in the chat if you've got any questions, and I'll pop them over to Rachel. I'm also just going to pop into the chat the link to the application for the Erickson and Lanning Trainer Certification Institute if you're interested in that. Just a reminder that applications close mid-May, so make sure you get your applications in soon.
And I found myself saying some things that were kind of like anthropomorphizing. I can never say that word right, but really, again, we have to keep going back even when I'm saying things to be like, no, it is just patterns. Because I'll be like, oh, I wonder what chat thinks. It's like, well, it doesn't think. It
Yeah.
really is just the patterns. But I mean, I find myself and my students saying that and trying to stop. And I just did it in this presentation here too. It's really, it is just a system of the next best pattern, but it is getting a lot better. Um, yeah, AI is moving so fast. How do you stay up with it and what can we do? And I think that's kind of one of the pieces I'm thinking about here too is as long as we keep bringing it back to our human thinking, no matter what advances are going on, we need to keep bringing it back to that part. How are we keeping the humanity in there? Because it is going so, so fast. And I think about Rachel, it was like 5 or 6 years ago, listening to you talk about how knowledge is happening and changing so fast, and it has like this lifespan of a year and a half. And now I feel like we're at this lifespan of a month, you know?
Day, yeah. Indeed, indeed. And it's interesting too because it we talk about the importance of students being able to think, and one of the most complex thing is we are experiencing AI as an adult where we've built a lifetime of ability to think critically, but students who are still developing that skill, learning to question, I think is a little different and is a little bit more complex. I was asking AI just at the end of last week some directions on the best way to analyze quite a complex data analysis process. And it said, oh, days 1 to 3, you should do this with the data. And then you'll need to spend a couple more days of doing this with the data, looking for patterns. And it told me, 4 or 5 times, you'll need to look for these patterns, look for these patterns. And then at the end of that, I went, couldn't you do that for me? And it went, yes, I can, if you like. Upload the document. I'm like, you just outlined a 7-day process because I asked you to outline a process for me. So you did because that was my prompt. But actually, your better response would have been, would you like me to tell you how I could do that for you? But it won't. It'll tell you exactly what you ask it to do. So I think that's so interesting. I did see a thing. Could you go back? Could you put up the slide? Oops, hang on. Where was it from, Leslie? Could you put up the slide with the with your information again? The last bit too. Oh, there you go. You've got it there.
Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot. It is a lot to think about, and I I was like, how much do I share? Was it overload or underload you with information? But like, please reach out. And something I was just talking to my husband about today was trying to find a place where we can share both on a document and with an AI agent. I asked him if he would help me build this to actually show the different competencies that I've been kind of looking at that were first recommended in 2020 by Georgia Tech, but they're all these very relevant things about like how are we thinking about student thinking, what are we thinking about design, but maybe having some kind of repository where we can share the things that we're learning and then have an actual AI that is trained just on that to be able to chat about us that are thinking about pedagogy and education and how we're going to use it. So he said he's going to work on that with me this weekend. So if I find that, I will definitely share that with Rachel if you want to, if anyone's curious
Yeah, absolutely.
on building something together. Because I mean, we do have all this brain power in all these different places of the world. So, and there is now a tool that will help us connect that. We just need to, make it happen and put our thoughts in there together.
Yeah, Shauna is also saying it's much like when I taught younger grades and had to teach how the search engine works and how it will rank answers with paid ads going to the top. Now we need to do the same with AI.
Hmm.
And I
I know.
guess we're also waiting to see how paid ads and paid content in AI, how they're going to monetize that and what impact that will have on the results we do when people can pay for their answers to be the things that come through first.
Right.
Watch this space.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. It's been such an important conversation and one that we all need to, continue to wrestle with as new systems come through. Thank you, Rachel, for sharing your knowledge and expertise on the subject and for challenging us to think a little deeper about what this means for our students and for ourselves as learners.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. Thank you for all participating.
Yeah, we offer these masterclasses monthly, so do join us next month for our next one. I think our next one is on assessment. So we'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.